New Orleans Saints are back on track after a 34-0 win over the New England Patriots in Week 5. So is all well in Saints land? We'll discuss on this edition of the Saints Insider Podcast for Wednesday, October 11th. I'm Zach Ewing with Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan. For those of you watching on YouTube, we switched things up. Luke was in that chair. He missed one show. We decided it worked better, Wally Pip, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where we're at. We're still brought to you by Bank Plus, though. We'd like you to know their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Luke, are you and Jeff comfortable over there?
I really don't like being this close to Jeff very often. Whenever we book our airline travel, he usually sits in the front. I sit in the back and try to stay as far away from each other. So I'm honestly not very comfortable with the setup, but I think we can get through the show.
Does that have anything to do with Rod not wanting to sit next to me too?
No comment.
Maybe my legs.
No, I think it was. I'm not sure.
It was a management decision. We'll just put it like that, and we'll have no further comment on the matter. So, what we will comment on is the Saints 34-0 over the Patriots, and we talked about this last week, guys. They needed a win. It wasn't a must-win, but you can just tell the whole mood in the team kind of relaxed after not just a win, but really a convincing, cathartic blowout victory.
I think so, and I think this is the thing they kept saying after the game was, this is who we are. This is who we thought we were. Not the team that got really run out of its own building against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a week earlier. They thought they were a good team. They thought they were a team that is capable of dominating bad teams. I think it's pretty clear that New England is a bad team, but when you go up to that type of environment on the road, you want to be able to kind of put your foot down on the neck and win big. That's what they did. I think they are feeling a lot better about themselves now. That the key for them is, can they keep it going? That's really, we've seen these kind of one-off performances from last year. I mean, last year they killed the Raiders 24-0. I'm not even sure if they won the next week's game. So they got to keep it going here. They don't, obviously they're not going to shut out everybody every week. Rod wrote a great story in today's paper about how difficult shutouts are. But I think if they can keep playing sound football on the offensive end, we've seen time and time again this year their defense is good enough to beat anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, we have to kind of slow down. It's one game. They're 3-2, but that's about where I think, Rod, we all expected them to be after 5 games. So they're kind of back on track, and now they can build from here.
They are definitely back on track. And Luke mentioned it. I mean, this New England team, I thought was a really bad team. It was they were just hard to watch almost. And, once the Saints got up on them, when it was 7-0, I was thinking okay, that might be enough. Then when it was 14-0, I mean, they were just playing catch up the rest of the way, and there was just no shot that they were coming back, I didn't think. And that was a team that just, they're just not very good right now. And that's what the Saints needed. I mean, they needed a game like that, and they were able to get it.
Yeah, and we'll return to your point about shutouts and 7-0 being it was enough. Can you imagine if the Saints had won 7-0 with just a defensive touchdown last week?
No. The halls would have been burning. Everybody would have been still very, very pissed off. But Rod's right though. 7-0 after their second possession of the game, and you were like, I think I've seen enough. They're not going to do squat against this defense. They have a lot of problems up there in New England.
Patriots got one field goal try, and it came because of a catch and penalty on the same play that I think gained them 37 yards, and the catch was questionable. It got upheld on review, and the penalty was questionable, and that was the only time they even got in field goal range.
Yeah, look, I think it speaks to that performance speaks to a lot of things. Mainly, I think, focus and preparation. And I'm starting to wonder sometimes, and this is human nature, but we've talked about this on the pod before, they don't play as well at home. The Saints haven't. They haven't now for 2 years, and I think there might be just a little bit of a lackadaisical nature, maybe a little contentedness or feeling comfortable at home that they didn't have when they went on the road last week. I mean, we talked to players all last week, and that was the mantra from the coaching staff and Dennis Allen: focus on preparation, the attention to details, and it seemed like the leaders also took that stance, and it played out in the game. Now, can they, like Luke said, carry that over and maintain that level of preparation, that's the key. I mean, you can do it for 1 week. A lot of teams can do it. Can you keep doing it over the course of a 17-game season? I think that's the challenge to sustaining this.
So we've gone from this like chaotic week. I mean, a week ago we were sitting here talking about how Pete Carmichael could get fired or demoted, and Dennis Allen needs to do something to keep the target off of his own back. And now everything seems like it's calmed down from one win. But aren't we just one bad performance away from being right back where we were a week ago?
I would say so. I think if this team goes out and lays an egg against the Texans on Sunday, I think we're right back at square one or square zero, whatever square you want to call it. So yeah, I mean, it was just one game, and it was against a really bad team. So I just think this team needs to come out and try to stack some of these performances like the one they had, against the Patriots.
I mean, obviously, if they're going to do that, it's going to start with the defense. And Rod, I'll come back to you because you did write that column about the shutouts. This is their third shutout in the Saints. What was it, 26 games?
Yeah, 26.
Which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's more than pretty much every other team in the NFL during that stretch. I think it was the Commanders. You talked about the Washington franchise hasn't had a shutout in more than a decade. So 3 shutouts in 26 games is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. Actually, Washington goes back to 1991, which I think is one of the most absurd stats I've ever heard, that they haven't shut anybody out in such a long time. But shutouts in the NFL are hard to come by. And, Dennis Allen kind of mentioned it. You have to – not only do you have to be good, but you have to catch some breaks. And in this particular game, the Patriots missed a field goal that you talked about earlier. So, I mean, it takes a lot to shut a team out in the NFL.
And they don't have to pitch shutouts, as you said, Luke, but they have to if they're going to win games and be successful this season, it's got to be that defense that we saw in New England and not really the defense we saw against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and I think we can fairly expect maybe not the defense that we saw in New England, right? Like we said, it's really hard to have that kind of day. But I think we can expect the team we've seen 4 out of 5 games so far. Right? We were looking back through the numbers. They're top 10 in basically everything right now. Red zone, pass defense, run defense, scoring. You look at the advanced metrics, they're top 10 in success rate on both against the run and the pass. They're top 10 in EPA per play, which is, those are signs of a good defense. And we haven't seen this team play really elite quarterback play yet. I think out of all the quarterbacks they've faced, you could say,
man, who is the best quarterback the Saints have faced?
Baker Mayfield?
I guess.
Maybe?
Or Jordan Love? It's
right. Okay, so
it's not Mac Jones.
So they haven't been super tested yet. I think they're going to get a good test this week. C.J. Stroud has been very good. I think he's got 7 touchdowns against no interceptions. I think the Texans are currently number 3 in the NFL in pass offense. We're going to see exactly how good they are this week, right? But I think for me, this all starts with how good they've been up front. It was a huge problem for them last year, stopping the run. And, again, this is the same sort of thing. We haven't seen him go against a lot of superstar backs. They went up against Derrick Henry in week 1. He didn't have a great game. But I think he still averaged about 4 yards a carry. As long as they are keeping teams in these bad 3rd and long situations, I think that's why we saw this team have so much defensive success in the past 5 years. They were so good against the run. And those situations, that's where Dennis Allen really shines, where you can bring that NASCAR package on, where they've got basically 4 pass rushers on the field, and you've got a really deep secondary that is going to take advantage of when these pass rushers get home and hit the quarterbacks and throw these kind of fluttering balls like we saw on the pick 6. Carl Granderson coming around on a stunt, nails Mac Jones, ball wobbles in the air, Tyrann Mathieu picks it off. That's like the hallmark of the Saints defense. So I think we are going to be able to count on them to be very good. Now it's just a matter of if the offense can keep pace.
And I think they found the formula in New England too. I mean, this was kind of what Dennis Allen wanted all along. Like Luke said, lights out defense, good special teams, and then just enough offense. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't turn it over. And every once in a while, Derek Carr make a big play and lean on Alvin Kamara and his dynamic playmaking ability. That's kind of how this team's going to win. They're not going to be a 30-point-a-game scoring offense. That's just not what they're built to do. That's not what Dennis Allen wants to do. But they don't have to. If they can just kind of get in the 20s, I think they're going to win most of the games they play. And they should against this lineup of quarterbacks they're playing. I mean,
Yeah.
who we got next year? You got C.J. Stroud's a rookie. Then you get Trevor Lawrence. They've been up and down. And then,
Gardner Minshew.
yeah.
I mean, it's no end in sight of inexperienced or unproven quarterbacks.
So it's not murderer's row. What is it like?
It's like
Shoplifter's row.
I was going to say like feather pillow row, but I don't know if it's. I mean, the Saints by some metrics have faced the weakest schedule in the NFL. So let's keep it in perspective. They've only I think they've actually been outgained by like 0.1 yards per play or per game or something like that. It's very close to even. So as good as the defense has been, the offense has still struggled. And that's not to say that this was totally unexpected. We talked about in the preseason the offensive line was a work in progress, and we've seen some progress, right? Like I think this past Sunday was easily their best game. Were they elite? I'm not sure New England posed enough of a challenge for us to say they were elite, but it was clearly better than what we'd seen the first few weeks.
Yeah, look, they ran the ball a lot better. There's no question. Pass protection was better. But it's just so hard to evaluate because New England was so bad. I mean, they were bad in all phases of that game. And it looked like, talking to some of the New England writers, they made some good points about, like, this team's got a lot of mercenary kind of free agents that they haven't brought in the past, and they're collecting checks and almost have checked out on Belichick. So I don't know. It's hard for me to really gauge. I think Luke makes a good point. You're going to get the exact opposite this week. You've got a young coach, a new coaching staff, and a lot of enthusiasm. So these guys are going to be bought in for the Texans. Now, they're probably still a year or two away, but it's not going to be about effort and intensity this week. I mean, you got a team that's trying to prove itself every week they go out there. That's not the case in New England. So I think we'll get a better gauge this week.
To your point, though, I do think the offensive line now is strung together two of their best games this year, and they're continuing to get a little bit healthier. They had their regular starting five in there this past week. I think Trevor Penning has, after all the hand-wringing we had in the first 2 weeks of the season, I think he's actually played pretty well these last 3 weeks here. So I think they are really on the up. And if they can continue to kind of get this ground game going a little bit, I think we see the impact it has on the game. Derek Carr was talking about that 30-yard completion he had to Kendra Miller. That was a play-action pass. And the linebackers got sucked up. They saw it was a pass play. They started drifting back as fast as they could to get back in the passing lanes. And they lost track of the guy who the pump or the play-action fake went to completely. Caught it in the flat, and there was nobody in front of him, gained 30 yards. So that's there's those small little aspects of this offense that really start to take off if the line is playing well and they're able to get the run game going. They're able to protect Derek Carr. 2 sacks this past week. One of them you were counting in the press box. It was like 5 seconds that he held the ball.
Yeah,
they're doing pretty well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to your point, it's football 101, right? Like you have to have good offensive line play. Pete Carmichael didn't do anything crazy different, Rod, but what he did get was good offensive line play, and that and maybe got the running game going, all those sorts of things, and all of a sudden, all those plays he calls look better without him really changing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the running game is something that, we've talked about that on here for several weeks. They finally were able to get, Alvin Kamara had, 80-something yards, I think, and just being able to do that just makes life so much simpler for this offense. Dennis Allen did talk about, they had some issues still with the pre-snap penalties. We saw some of those, and Dennis Allen kind of mentioned that was, he said they were doing a little bit more motion this week, and he thought that's what attributed to that, but other than that, I don't think they didn't do a whole lot of, different things. I think they just, I kind of talked about execution last week. This week they actually executed. So
yeah, I mean, it really was a stark difference, and it extends to special teams too. I want to give a mention to Blake Grupe, who had a
shout out Blake.
Yeah, 54-yard and 53-yard field goal, and both of them looked like they would have been good from 60. I mean, they were easily good. So he was NFC Special Teams Player of the Week.
That's right.
Is that right? Yeah, just announced this morning. So, shout out to Blake. And all of a sudden, things look a little bit better. You have a chance to go to 4-2. Dunk, you talk about the Texans, but as we kind of spin things forward, they're more enthusiastic. This is a team you feel like you should be able to go in there and beat.
Yeah, I think they're more talented than the Texans, I think, across the board. But again, they're going to have to bring it. They're going to have to maintain that focus. We talked about the attention to detail, and that certainly applies to the offensive line play. The Saints did a good job of picking up a lot of these exotic looks that Bill Belichick's defense will throw at teams. That wasn't a problem this past week. They're going to face a very similar type of aggressive defense. DeMeco Ryans is excellent defensive coach, and they'll throw some wrinkles, but they're not that talented. And they're a year or two away, I think, from being a contender. But if they don't, we've seen this team isn't talented enough to just go out there and go through the motions against the Texans. And I don't think they will. I mean, this game could be one of those turning point games that we look back on and say, yeah, this is where they found their formula, found their confidence, and start to believe in what they're doing. And we talked about that on the pod last week. It was a big game for the coaching staff going against Bill Belichick and his staff. I thought they delivered. But again, I mean, they were just so bad. I mean, they were basically just kicking field goals, getting one first down because they had such a dominant field position edge in that game. I think D.A. talked about it on his coach's show this week. He said they had an average advantage in field position, starting field position of 18 yards. That's insane. I mean, normally it's about 3 yards a good day.
Yeah.
So their difference where they started was 18. They were having to not put together very long drives offensively. They had 70 plays, which is a lot in a game. So you're going to amass some rushing yards when you have that many opportunities because the defense is just completely shutting down the Patriots offense. So again, let's not get carried away, but certainly a confidence builder.
Can they stack two good games together? That's all that matters out of this one. Like, can they take what happened last week and carry it over to this week and not fall back into what happened the week before?
Yeah.
And this is something we haven't seen out of this team really since probably the 2020 season. I guess maybe early in the 2021 season. So let's just see, can they do good things 2 weeks in a row?
They have not been more than a game above 500 since the Halloween day where Jameis Winston gets hurt against the Bucs. I think they won that game to go to 5-2. Then they lost
four straight,
four or five in a row,
yeah.
And they have not been more than a game above 500 since then. So to your point, like you can't get ahead in this league just yo-yoing back and forth. You've got to put a couple together. So, Saints Insider Podcast is brought to you by Bank Plus. We will have a full preview of the Saints and Texans game in Friday's episode. So tune in for that. Same YouTube channels. Hit the like button, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, which you can do also, leave a 5-star review for us. And sign up for the Saints Insider newsletter. It's NOLA.com/Saints Insider. Join more than 30,000 subscribers who get our stuff in your email inbox for free every morning. All right, one more final thought as we go forward. Like I think I'd like to go back to the defense, guys. Marcus May comes back this week. Peyton Turner's still out. But other than that, this is a completely healthy, full unit. And we talked about from the beginning of the season, from the summer all the way back in July, we're talking like, hey, the Saints are due some positive regression in the injury department. Now here we are 5 weeks into the season, and I think it's fair to say that we've seen that, and now we get to see if this team can take off.
Yeah, this is as healthy as we've seen this team in a long time. I mean, you look at those injury reports from last year. I mean, it's like every week it was just something. And, I mean, Luke just knocked on wood, and we'll probably go to practice today and get some unexpected.
And no team ever goes through with no injuries. They had Paulson Adebo out a couple weeks. Did you get Jamal Williams back at practice this week, or they can at least, and then back in the games next week? But like, it's a pretty good spot for this team to be in looking forward if they can continue to build on last week.
Yeah. Let's see if they can stay healthy, right? But if they can, like they have started so far. I mean, like, let's just be honest. They're 4 deep at pass rusher. They're 4 deep at defensive tackle. Linebacker's really the only position where they're not super deep, but that's because we haven't gotten a chance to see what DeMarco Jackson can do, or Nephi Sewell, or any of those guys they have in the back. And then the only spot where they've really been tested by injuries or suspension or whatever it is on defense this year is in the secondary. And we saw Ike Yadam go out there, play a couple of really good games. I think we've seen a lot of really positive things out of Jordan Howden, and he's going to continue to have a role even after Marcus May gets back. Lonnie Johnson, I thought, did some really nice things. They're really deep. And that depth, when you're healthy, is huge. It's not just to have guys like fill in. It is it is really important, especially on the defensive line when they can rotate guys in the way they have. It's a huge part of their defensive success. So let's see if they can keep that going, because I just think that they have a chance to be a really, really special unit on that side of the ball.
Yeah, look, injuries are going to happen. They're going to have some guys go down. It's part of the game, but they're due some better luck. And there's no question that health, injury, whether you have a lot or not, that's like one of the most, if not the most important thing in the NFL, is like luck on injuries. I think the Eagles last year had one starter out in the Super Bowl from the start of the season. There's a reason that they went to the Super Bowl, because they were one of the healthiest teams. So if the Saints can continue this, I mean, they can't afford any more injuries to Derek Carr and things like that. But I think clearly they're healthier than most of the teams that are playing. Certainly was the case last week.
Interesting spot for the team. I mean, it could easily be 4-1. You look at that game in Green Bay. If Derek doesn't get hurt, probably got to figure they almost finished the game out anyway. They have played a weak schedule. I still say 5 weeks into the season, we're not 100% sure of what we've got here with the Saints.
I agree. And we're not going to be sure until we see this offense just string together some games where they're actually looking like they're playing up to their talent level.
Yeah.
Right.
But to your point, Jeff, like this has been, you take advantage of the breaks you get. And they've had some injury breaks. They've had a weak schedule. Sounds a lot like the Eagles last year. And I'm not saying they're going to go to the Super Bowl, but that's how you win in the NFL, is you get those windows, you get those pockets where you can take advantage of a soft schedule or some injuries or lack thereof. And all of a sudden somebody looks up at the end of November and you're 8-2 and wondering how you got there.
Yeah, I think back to that 2018 season where the Saints were clearly the best team in the NFC that year and stubbed their toe in the NFC Championship game against the Rams team that wasn't as good, and the Rams make it to the Super Bowl and really have a chance to win the Super Bowl that year, and they weren't that talented. So it can happen. Once you get in the postseason, and especially if you get a home game in the Superdome, the Saints could beat anybody in that environment. So, yeah, they've got to start. They can't afford any more Bucs games. They can't afford those kind of goose eggs. They've got to bring it every week. They're not that talented. I mean, we watched the 49ers together. That's the best team in the NFL. I mean, I don't think they're in that class yet.
Yeah. Although, and Rod made this point, I think, on Twitter too, that they actually did as well against that 49ers offense as anybody has over the past two seasons. Now, granted, Brock Purdy was not starting in that game. It was Jimmy Garoppolo. But even Jimmy G was showing more flash in that offense than he did against the Saints. So.
Yeah, and that was a game, the Saints had on the third. That's a game that the Saints probably should have won. I mean, I think Kamara fumbled. I can't remember what all happened.
Yeah, Kamara fumbled inside the 5. They had a pick 6 get overturned. They had a couple drops in the end zone, and they held San Francisco to 13 points.
Yeah, and this is the 49ers team they're averaging like 20-something points a game. I think.
Winning about 20 points a game.
Rolling teams, yeah. All right, so the Saints got to bring it every week. We bring it every Wednesday and Friday. We'll be back on Friday with the Saints Insider podcast right here, same YouTube and Facebook channels. Check us out then. By the way, next week we are moving on YouTube. If you're watching this on the main NOLA.com YouTube channel, we're moving everything over just to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. So hopefully that's not too confusing. We're going to drop something in the description of this video as well. But if you're not subscribed to that Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel, now's the time to get over there, subscribe to it, get your notifications, and make sure that you are locked on to the Saints Insider podcast. So for Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan, Amelia Cotton and Norman Bell are behind the glass for us. And we also appreciate Bank Plus, our sponsor for these weekly podcasts. This has been the Saints Insider podcast, and we'll see you Friday, everybody.